king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 42 Preparation. On June 30, 1495, Marin finally led his troops to the vicinity of Parma. However, Marin did not lead his troops to the Italian coalition camp to join the Italians, but hid in the hills on the west bank of the Taro River, a tributary of the Po River, Italy's largest river. Then, he sent people to nearby towns to urgently order 500 engineer shovels. The reason for ordering 500 engineer shovels was, of course, to dig trenches. Marin was planning to encircle the 8,000 French knights who were fleeing the French army. If they were on flat ground, and the French were brute force and charged forward without fear of death, Marin's phalanx would not be enough to withstand the enemy's attack. Moreover, the French had a large number of people, so they could choose to encircle and attack from all sides. Therefore, it was very important to prevent the French cavalry from charging. To stop the French cavalry from charging, trenches, horse traps, tripwires and sharp stakes were good options. The charge of heavy cavalry is different from the charge of infantry. If heavy cavalry really charges, as long as there are enough of them, even a forest of spears will be difficult to resist. However, setting up enough trenches, horse traps, tripwires and sharp wooden stakes in front of the forest of spears can have a miraculous effect. In front of these traps, any cavalry would be forced to slow down. Once the cavalry slowed down, the impact force would be gone. At this time, if you wanted to climb over the trench and charge the spear formation, you would definitely be courting death. There is no need to mention the trenches and pointed wooden stakes, which are all means commonly used in Europe. However, Marin's two trenches are more vulgar than the single trench popular in Europe now. The horse traps and tripwires are more oriental in style. The horse trap is actually a hunter's trap, a pit dug on the flat ground and covered with grass. This simple trap is easy for infantry to see. But it is different for cavalry. They rush from a distance and have no time to observe the ground. Even if the trap is simple, the enemy cavalry coming quickly from a distance will not have time to identify it. By the time they identify it, the warhorse can't stop at all, and can only watch as it steps into the trap. Then, the people and horses fall down. As for the tripwire, it goes without saying that everyone in China knows that Guarneri was trapped by the tripwire. There are generally two types of tripwires, dead tripwires and live tripwires. The so-called dead trip rope is to set up two wooden stakes on the ground, connected by a rope. If the horse's hoof is caught by the rope when it rushes over, the horse and rider will fall. However, the enemy can also see this dead trip rope. If you have good riding skills and the horse is obedient, you can avoid the dead trip rope. The live tripwire is controlled by the soldiers. When the enemy cavalry rushes over, the soldiers on both sides suddenly pull up the tripwire, and the horses and knights have no time to react, and they are trapped. Logically speaking, a live tripwire is better. However, a live tripwire also has its own disadvantages. If the soldiers are ambushed in the wrong direction, it will be troublesome. The ambushed soldiers themselves may be exposed to the enemy's butcher knife. Marin had few men and could not afford casualties, so he decided to use the death trip rope. After all, the death trip rope was simple in technology and very cheap. Although, a single death trip rope could be easily avoided by the enemy, and even the warhorse could jump over it directly. However, Marin used a combination of traps. There was a pit trap just in front of the dead tripwire. Often, even if you drove your horse over the tripwire, you would fall into the pit trap. Besides, Marin planned to ambush the French cavalry in the middle of the night, and even if it was a dead tripwire, the French cavalry would find it difficult to find. In the next few days, Marin surveyed the terrain while sending Saul to get information. After all, there was more than one road to the northwest from Fornovo, and Marin was not sure which one Charles VIII would take. Because he didn't know where the French camp was located. When Charles VIII fled, he must have set out from the French camp, taking the most convenient road, and avoiding the direction of the Allied forces to avoid being intercepted. Therefore, in order to determine the direction of the French army's retreat, we must first know the French army's garrison, and then also know the coalition's garrison. Finally, based on these situations, we can determine the French army's escape route. However, even if he knew the French camp, Marin did not dare to set up an ambush directly. Because, before escaping, the French would definitely explore the way first. The French had many cavalry, so sending a few scouts was no problem at all. Therefore, if he wanted to ambush the French, he had to avoid the detection of the French cavalry. However, he had to ensure that the ambush was in the right place. If the French ran away from another road, his small square formation would not be able to catch up. Because the other side used cavalry, and his side used infantry. So, in the past few days, Marin ordered all members to practice digging trenches and horse pits, while he took Shower and others out on horseback to explore the terrain and roads. Finally, Marin determined that there were two roads to the northwest of Fornovo. One was a flat road on the plain. However, this road had to turn northeast after crossing the Taro River. The French could not take a shortcut by taking this road. Moreover, they might be caught up by the coalition forces. Because the coalition forces seemed to be by the river, they could control this road as long as they went a little north. The other road goes across the hilly area and goes straight to the northwest. After crossing the hilly area, you can reach the banks of the Po River. Then, along the Po River, you can go to Asti, an important town in the Piedmont region under the jurisdiction of the Duchy of Savoy. Asti is also the most forward military fortress and assembly point for the French army after entering Italy. As long as they arrive in Asti, the French army will be basically safe. Moreover, Charles VIII will not defend Asti to the death. As long as he, the king, leaves, there is not much meaning for the coalition forces to attack Asti. This hilly road has many dirt slopes and low hills on both sides. In Marin's opinion, the middle of this road is the most suitable for setting an ambush. Moreover, if the French army marched during the day, it might be difficult to set up an ambush. After all, Charles VIII was not incompetent and would definitely send scout cavalry to explore the way. However, Charles VIII fled at night after the Battle of Fornovo. Marching in the middle of the night, as long as Marin's men did not light torches and make no noise, it would be difficult for French scouts to discover the ambush in the middle of the night. But the problem is how to make the French army take this mountain road instead of that flat road. For this, Marin was racking his brains. "Master, what are you thinking about?" Kohler came over attentively and brought Marin a pizza. "Oh, nothing. I'm just worried about how to make the enemy follow my plan and take one path instead of the other." Marin took the pizza and said while taking a bite of it. "Is that so? Young master, you destroyed the other road, right? Now that road is difficult to travel on, the enemy will have no choice but to take the road you want them to take." Kohler said with his head tilted. "Destroy the road? Oh, that's indeed a solution." Marin slapped his head. Then, Marin began to gather people and plan to dig the flat road. Marin happened to have 500 engineer shovels in his hand. 2 people took turns to use each shovel, so they could dig continuously. However, Saul told Marin that the coalition forces might reach Fornovo via this road. If Marin damaged the road, the coalition forces might not be able to reach Fornovo as Marin expected. Marin thought about it and decided to give up destroying the road for the time being, because he didn't want to affect the progress of the Fornovo battle because of his own road destruction. However, he decided that during the day after the battle between the two sides broke out, he would bring his men and horses quietly to this road, dig up the road, and divert river water in to block the French army's advance. Then, we would go to the ambush site on another road and wait for the French army to come at night. Chapter 43, The Battle Begins. For several days, Marin arranged for Schwartz to lead his soldiers to practice digging pits and ambushes in the hilly area on the west bank of the Taro River. Marin himself, with Saul, rode on horseback, each carrying a telescope, to conduct a secret reconnaissance near Fornovo. Because they had a telescope, Marin and Saul did not need to get close to conduct reconnaissance. They only needed to stand on the high slope west of the river and conduct reconnaissance with the telescope. Moreover, in order to facilitate reconnaissance, Marin and Saul did not wear heavy armor. Each of them only carried a light sword and a telescope. Early in the morning of July 6, Marin arranged for all the soldiers in the phalanx to continue resting and recuperating, while he took Saul to continue reconnaissance. The weather was good in the morning and the roads were relatively dry. After waiting for a while, Marin finally saw the French army on the south bank of the Taro River and the Italian coalition forces on the north bank. Great, it's finally here. Marin was very excited. He had been patient for a long time and did not dare to interfere in the Italians' military affairs because he was afraid that the Battle of Fornovo would not start. Now, the two sides still fought in Fornovo, proving that his foresight was useful, which made him extremely excited. "Master, did you know they were going to fight here?" Shawa was surprised. Because he had a feeling that Marin seemed to know that the two sides were going to fight here. In fact, Saul's guess was correct. Marin really knew that the two sides would fight here. The problem was that Marin was afraid that his little butterfly would affect the battle. But fortunately, the battle was carried out as scheduled. After confirming that the two sides would fight here as scheduled, Marin couldn't wait any longer. He left Saul on the high slope on the west bank to continue observing, while he himself planned to return to the camp to prepare. As for how to prepare, Of course, they were going to dig up the road along the north bank of the river. If the French army escaped at night and took this road in the plain area, Marin would not be able to stop the French. Because, besides the Taro River, there are farmlands on the side of this road. If you cut off the road, the French can still walk through the fields. Therefore, Marin's plan was to dig up the riverbank of the Taro River and flood the road and nearby farmland. In this way, the French cavalry would not be able to take this road, otherwise they would be stuck in the mud. Heavy cavalry is heavy to begin with, and if the horses' hooves are stuck in the mud, it is difficult to get out, which is very dangerous. As for the time of excavation, Marin tentatively scheduled it for the afternoon. Because, according to records, there will be a heavy rain in the afternoon. At that time, the soil will become soft and easy to dig. At present, the soil is very hard and it is very laborious to dig. After returning to the camp, Marin took a rest first and asked Schwartz to call him at lunch. After all, he had to take a rest before leading his men to ambush the French in the middle of the night. Otherwise, falling asleep in the middle of the night would affect the battle. As for poor Saul, he needed to continue to observe the battle between the French and Italian coalition forces. At the same time, before taking a break, Marin arranged a group of people to go to both sides of the mountain road facing northwest in advance to set up an ambush. This mountain road can't be considered a mountain road, it can only be considered a road in a hilly area. There are many hills and small mountains on both sides of the road, which are very suitable for ambushes on both sides. Marin had seen many war movies in his previous life. Ancient people loved to throw stones and fireballs from the hills. However, it was going to rain heavily in the afternoon, so throwing fireballs was out of the question. Because firewood would be difficult to ignite under heavy rain. So Marin planned to use stones to hit them. To this end, the team sent out was responsible for collecting small and medium-sized stones throughout the hilly area, and transporting them to the high slopes on both sides of the mountain road at the ambush site using the wheelbarrows used to transport goods during Marin's march. Of course, Kohler, the leader of the team, was not stupid. He did not let all 100 of his soldiers work as coolies to move stones. Instead, he sent these 100 soldiers to a nearby village to capture 1,000 Italian farmers to help collect and move stones. In this way, Kohler used the least effort to complete Marin's instructions. At noon, Marin woke up and Kohler came back to report that he had completed the task of moving the stones. So fast, Kohler, you're not kidding me, are you? How can that be possible, master? I sent these 100 men to the nearby villages to capture 1,000 Italian peasants for this. How can the soldiers do this so quickly? You have won, why didn't I think of it? Master, you are thinking about the big things. Small things like this are the easiest for me to handle. Kohler flattered him. Stop talking nonsense. Are those farmers still there? Marin suddenly thought, since Italian farmers can be used to move stones, why not let them help dig the road? If his 1,100 men were asked to dig the road in the afternoon and dig for half a day, by the evening, who would have the energy to fight the French? We were just about to send them away. Don't dismiss them, Kohler. Give these farmers some food. There's work for them to do in the afternoon. Yes, sir. Kohler quickly sent people to retain the group of Italian farmers and distributed some low-quality black bread. In the afternoon, it really started to rain heavily. Saul came back and reported that both sides were mobilizing their troops, but the battle had not started yet and would probably start in the afternoon. Marin calmed down and knew that the situation was not out of control. So, after the heavy rain, when the rain was a little lighter and the two sides were about to come into contact, he sent people to escort the group of farmers, with engineer shovels and farmers' shovels and pickaxes. Italian agriculture was the most developed in Europe at that time, and the agricultural tools here were highly metallized, and began to dig the river bank on the road behind the coalition forces that could not be seen. At first, the local farmers were reluctant to dig up the river bank, because if they did, the fields of some of them who lived near the river bank would be flooded. But under the pressure of the soldiers' spears, they had to obey Marin's arrangement and began to dig the river bank. While the Venetian infantry crossed the Taro River and fought against the French-Swiss mercenaries on the south bank, Marin led the Italian peasants to dig the riverbank of the Taro River. When the Swiss mercenaries repelled the Venetian infantry, Marin finally dug up the river bank. Then, the Taro River, which had already swollen due to the heavy rain, washed away the riverside road and rushed directly into the fields beside the river. After the river water flooded the riverside road and nearby fields, Marin did not stop, but led his troops to suppress the group of farmers and went to the ambush site in the hilly area to dig pits. Since there was free labor, it was reluctant to let its soldiers dig pits. Then, this group of poor Italian peasants continued to be forced to run to the mountain road, arrived at the ambush site, began to dig trenches and horse pits, and under the command of soldiers who knew Italian, set up simple dead horse trip ropes. The place where Marin chose to set up an ambush was about 10 kilometers away from the battlefield, and there were hills and mountains on both sides of the road. The French had to pass through here if they wanted to take the mountain road. Moreover, this distance was also beyond the detection range of the French scouts without binoculars. When Marin directed the Italian peasants to finish digging trenches and horse pits, it was already 7 or 8 in the evening and it was dark. At this time, Saul sent a message that in the French camp, the French cavalry had just finished dinner and fed their horses, and seemed to be getting ready to go. Chapter 44, Ambush, Part 1. The Battle of Fornovo was called a battle, but it was actually a farce. Because neither side fought to the death. The only fierce battle was when the Venetian infantry crossed the river to attack the Swiss phalanx. And that battle lasted only more than an hour. Of course, there were many casualties in this battle, with more than 1,000 Swiss casualties and more than 2,000 Italian casualties. Including those who were scared away and fled, the Italians lost a total of about 5,000 people. But the weird thing is that the light cavalry from Mantua and Milan, who were responsible for outflanking the French army, were actually picking up gold and silver treasures on the road. This was also a plan of Charles VIII. He knew that the coalition had several thousand light cavalry. He was not afraid of a head-on confrontation, but he was worried that this group of Italian cavalry would outflank them from the side. So, in order to get away as quickly as possible, he gritted his teeth and scattered all the gold and silver treasures that he was reluctant to throw away on the roads on both sides of the French line. It must be said that Charles VIII's strategy was very successful. You know, most of the soldiers in this era were mercenaries, and they fought for money. Charles VIII gave up money and really attracted the Italian cavalry. Then, the 6,000 Italian cavalry forgot that they came to fight the French and dismounted to pick up treasures. Charles VIII was not interested in fighting and quickly led his men away from the battlefield and returned to the camp, leaving the Swiss and Venetians to confront each other. Afterwards, the Swiss also withdrew to the French camp. The remaining 5,000 Venetian infantry, in addition to the 2,000 killed, another 3,000 were scattered by the Swiss, did not dare to chase the Swiss, but retreated at the same time. In the French camp, the French and Swiss were stationed separately. The Swiss camp was on the northeast side, facing the coalition forces. The French knights were stationed on the southwest side, separated from the Swiss camp. After returning to the camp, Charles VIII had already made plans to escape at night. Therefore, he ordered his men and horses to rest, while the scouts were responsible for finding bridges and boats to cross the river. In fact, this road was originally the route for the French army to go south. Therefore, the French scouts did not go too deep into the two northbound roads to investigate, and did not find the ambush site of Marin. Moreover, it was already late, and the scouts could not see too far. After scouting for several kilometers, the French scouts confirmed that there was no problem. Moreover, the coalition camp was also monitored by the French scouts. After confirming that the coalition troops had returned, they ate and drank a lot and prepared to rest. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, Charles VIII confirmed from the report of the French scouts that the Italians in the Allied camp had basically rested, so he began to assemble all the French knights and prepare to escape. At this time, the French scouts had just collected enough wooden boats and built a pontoon bridge across the small Taro River, making it easier for the French knights to cross the river. Then, at about 10 o'clock in the evening, the French army began to cross the river somewhere in the western section of the Taro River, far away from the coalition camp. At this time, the Swiss were still kept in the dark, and they were abandoned by Charles VIII. At about 12 o'clock midnight, all the French knights and horses crossed the Taro River. Then, under the command of Charles VIII, they began to march along the riverside road in a northeastward direction. But after walking 10 kilometers, we arrived at the place where Marin dug the river bank. What's going on? Why did they stop? Charles VIII, who was in the middle of the team, rode forward and asked. Your Majesty, the river bank seems to have collapsed due to the heavy rain. Now, the roads and farmland are flooded by the river. It is difficult for the cavalry to pass. What should we do? Are we just going to turn back? Charles VIII said helplessly. Your Majesty, I remember there is another road leading to Asti, and that road saves more distance than this one, recommended a scout officer. Oh, there is such a road. Why didn't we take that road last time? It's like this, that's a mountain road. People and horses can pass through it, but it's difficult for artillery to pass through. The last time we came here, we carried too many artillery and it was not suitable to take that road. Indeed, when the French army invaded Italy last year, they brought more than 100 artillery pieces. It was indeed difficult to travel on mountain roads. But at this time, the French army had already lost all the artillery pieces. Even the carriages carrying treasures were no longer needed because the treasures were scattered. It is still possible to ride a horse through the not-so-steep mountain roads in the hilly areas. After all, horses are four-legged animals, not carriages that have high requirements for roads. Horses can pass through mountain roads with a small slope. However, knights cannot easily pass through flooded roads on the plains. Because the flooded roads and farmlands are very soft. The French knights wearing heavy armor are incredibly heavy. When passing through the flooded areas, the horses' hooves are easily stuck in the mud and difficult to get out. Moreover, Charles VIII was worried that the coalition forces would get the information and come to surround him. Therefore, in order to save time, Charles VIII decisively ordered to turn back and take the legendary mountain road, and plunged into Marin's trap. In fact, it was useless for Charles VIII to be cautious, because at night, the French scouts could not see very far. Even if he walked into an ambush, he would not be able to see it as long as he did not fall into a horse trap or a trench. At the same time, the French sent many scouts to investigate the Italian coalition camp and confirmed again and again that the Italians had not sent out any troops or personnel. Therefore, even a smart man like Charles VIII did not expect that someone would be waiting to plot against him. While the French turned around and hurried on their way, Marin was teaching his men to speak French. "Brothers, we are going to ambush the fleeing French later. They have more people, so we have little chance of winning if we fight them head-on. However, the French can't see clearly in the middle of the night, so we can scare them. Come on, everyone, say, surrender and no killing, French. Surrender and you won't be killed, French." The soldiers were a little confused and a little nervous at the same time. But Marin fooled them, saying that the French army was defeated and morale was low. Otherwise, if these grandsons knew that they were facing 8,000 unscathed French heavy cavalry, they might not have the courage to fight. However, they were ambushed on the high slopes on both sides of the road, and the French cavalry could not rush up the high slopes, so they were not worried. Moreover, even if the French found that they were outnumbered, they would not stop and attack the high slopes on both sides with all their strength. Because the French were running away, they were most afraid of alarming the Italian coalition. As long as they could withstand a few waves of attacks, the French would not continue to attack and waste time. Marin did not intend to completely destroy the French army. His plan was to inflict heavy damage on the French army. At the same time, he used the cover of night to frighten the French army and make them lose their composure. If he could kill or capture Charles VIII in the chaos, it would definitely be a great achievement. Because it was at night, it was difficult for the French to know how many people Marin had by observation. As long as Marin's men pretended to be powerful, they could intimidate the French army. "Charles VIII is dead, French." Marin taught everyone to shout again. "Ah!" Some soldiers who knew French were puzzled. "Isn't this a rumor?" Marin wanted to spread rumors. In the middle of the night, the French were suddenly attacked and must be panicked. If he shouted, "Charles VIII is dead," in French, it would definitely cause great chaos to the French army. Charles VIII did not have a loudspeaker to defend himself. Among the 8,000 French troops, someone would be scared by this false news. This move was learned from the Battle of Faichouet. The 800,000-strong army of the former Qin was tricked into retreating. Zhu Su shouted, "The Qin army is defeated," behind the formation, and then the group of former Qin soldiers, not knowing why, really thought they were defeated, and changed their retreat to running away. Thus, the 800,000-strong former Qin army was inexplicably defeated by tens of thousands of Eastern Qin troops. Marin planned to wait for the French to enter the ambush circle, throw a round of stones, then shoot a few rounds of arrows. Then, send people to shout, "Charles VIII is dead," in French, and at the same time, send people to make a lot of noise. Even if Charles VIII wanted to shout to prove that he was alive, he would be drowned out by the noise. Then, it would be difficult for the French not to be confused. Chapter 45 Ambush, Part 2. On the night of September 6, after a heavy rain during the day, the sky seemed much clearer. Although there were still some clouds, they were very thin. In addition, there was a crescent moon in the sky. Therefore, there was still some visibility at night, although it was very low. The French army fled because they were afraid of alerting the Italian coalition and the Swiss who were unaware that they were abandoned. Therefore, the French did not light torches. Because torches are too conspicuous at night and can be seen from a distance. If all 8,000 French cavalrymen held torches, anyone standing on a high ground could see the movement of the French army from a distance. In the middle of the night, horses can't run fast because they can't see. If the enemy uses infantry to chase, they may not be slower than heavy cavalry. If you are caught by the enemy, you can't escape. In the dark, cavalry is not as powerful as pikemen. Moreover, Charles VIII abandoned the Swiss mercenaries without authorization. At that time, the Swiss mercenaries might not be willing to help him escape. Therefore, Charles VIII ordered that torches should be lit at least until they left Fornovo and could no longer see any light from Fornovo. Before that, the French army could only rely on the faint starlight and the faint moonlight that was blocked by dark clouds from time to time. This mountain road is not suitable for vehicles because of its steep slopes in some places. Only horses and pedestrians can pass. Therefore, there are limited pedestrians on the road, and there is still a lot of green grass on the road, which has not been completely trampled. And it is precisely because of the existence of this green grass that this road is easier to walk on after the rain than the bare Roman road by the river. Marin was teaching everyone how to scare the French, but Saul came back in a hurry and said to Marin, "Sir, the French are coming." Marin was startled and began to get nervous. But in order not to disturb everyone, he pretended to be relaxed and said, "The French are coming, everyone, remember, when the battle begins, you must capture Charles VIII alive. Whoever captures Charles VIII alive, I will reward him with 10,000 gold coins, 10,000 gold coins." Many mercenaries who joined the army for money couldn't help drooling. Stimulated by Marin's generous reward, many people forgot about the tension and only had money in their eyes. As the French got closer, Marin asked everyone to climb up the hillsides on both sides. As for the bottom of the mountain, there were only trenches, wooden stakes, horse traps and tripwires to block the French from the front. In fact, Marin originally planned to lead his men to line up below and forcibly stop the French army. Although there is a high probability of stopping the French in that way, the French will definitely fight desperately because they have no choice, but this is the only way to go. However, the 1,100 men under Marin were all rookies who had never fought a war. It was too much to ask them to fight desperately with 8,000 French knights in the first battle. If they lost, they might also die here. Marin regretted not finding some weaker opponents to practice his courage and see blood beforehand. Because only veterans who have practiced courage and seen blood dare to fight to the death. And the new recruits who are fighting for the first time do not dare to fight to the death with the superior enemy, they do not have that confidence. Moreover, Marin had talked with Swiss officers in the army before, and knew that Swiss mercenaries fighting knights not only had spearmen, but also a large number of halberdmen. The reason for using halberds was to hook the knights wearing plate armor with the halberds and knock them down. Because the spears could not penetrate the plate armor. If the spears were used alone to resist the charging plate armor knights, the casualties would be limited. The Swiss often used halberds to hook the knights down, and then slowly stabbed them with spears, or used weapons such as maces to smash or injure the knights who fell to the ground. However, Marin only had spearmen, not halberdmen, and bows and arrows had little damage to plate knights, and Marin had no muskets. If the plate knights really charged head-on, the phalanx would be easily broken. Therefore, Marin had no choice but to ambush the French on two high slopes. Even if the ambush went wrong, it would be difficult for the French to rush up the high slopes on both sides. Even if the French knights dismounted and fought on foot, they would have difficulty climbing the slope because of the heavy plate armor they were wearing. Even if they climbed up the slope, they would be easily pushed down by the spearmen. But if they took off their plate armor, they would be easily stabbed to death by the spears when climbing up the slope. Therefore, as long as they occupied the high ground, they would be invincible. Although it was not impossible for the French to break through Marin's defense line, it would take a very long time. The problem is that Charles VIII is on the run and has no time to fight with Marin. Therefore, Charles VIII's attention should be on clearing the traps on the road instead of fighting with Marin's men. Marin's mission was to inflict heavy casualties on the French before they cleared the traps on the road, and at the same time, to create as much chaos as possible for the French army. Just as Marin was thinking about how to deal with it, Kohler suddenly came over. "Master, I would like to ask for a favor." "You say?" "I want to chase those Italian peasants back." "What?" "Let them disguise themselves as reinforcements." "This is a really good idea." Marin reacted and realized that it would be more effective to use living people to create momentum. "Where did the peasants go?" "I just asked Tara to send some people to a nearby village for the night. I will chase them back soon." "What if they don't like it?" "It's okay, they are just some timid farmers." "Master, give me 20 men, and I promise to bring them all back." "Okay, organize those 1,000 Italian peasants as soon as possible. Take them around the back of the French, light more torches, and make the formation more sparse, so that it looks like there are thousands of people. Then, when they get close to this side, let them shout together, 'Capture Charles VIII alive,' to scare the French." After being reminded by Kohler, Marin instantly thought of a solution. What if the French send people to fight? These farmers can't beat the French. Kohler was a little worried. Don't worry, gather the troops and bring enough torches, 2 for each person. When the troops are a certain distance away, stop and don't make any noise. When I find that the French are showing signs of breaking through the defense line, I will use firecrackers to warn you, and you will immediately lead others to light torches and start making noise. Master, I'm worried that the French will send out their remaining troops to stop me. Are you stupid? If the remaining troops want to intercept us, they will intercept us. Because if they go to fight with you, we can cut off their retreat. Oh, yeah, also, I will send people to throw more large stones behind the French army to block their way. The French are running for their lives, so they may focus on clearing the stones in front of them, and may not spend time clearing the stones behind them. That puts my mind at ease, master. I'll go now. Well, I'll give you 50 men so that you can suppress those farmers. Thank you, young master. Kohler led 50 soldiers to the village where Terra and the Italian farmers were. Terra had 10 people with him, plus Kohler's 50, the total number reached 60, which was enough to suppress the 1,000 farmers. However, Kohler needed to hurry up and make the torches. Marin required that each person take 2 torches to scare the French as much as possible. Then, we need to have 2,000 torches spread out sparsely, forming a formation of several thousand troops, to confuse the French.